I will talk about today in terms of my research, and I will try to go through this reasonably quickly, is the project I did and published at JCDL, that's the ACM, IEEE Joint Conference on Digital Libraries. And I was interested because digital libraries tend to be something where it's just on the computer, has no reality in the world, it's locked up down the internet, in effect. I was interested in how we could combine physical libraries and digital libraries in the same space, using some location-aware sensors. And I'm a great believer in seeing what you can do cheaply and dirtily, because often it actually gives you a lot of bangs for very little bucks. So this was actually a project that I did in 6 weeks, just after I joined the city. And it was a little bit of a quick sheep dip that turned out to be quite useful in the end. So one of the things that happens in a real library, and these are 3 real libraries. This photograph is of a very sort of old Dextrian type, mechanical, if you will, structured library. It's not a very pretty space, but it stores a lot of stuff. The library at the top right there is actually one of the graduate libraries at Stanford, and it's quite a nice old pleasant space if ever there was one, but lots of small chairs, and over here there's all sorts of magazines and stuff like that. There's nice computer spaces back here that can all be moved around, and there's proper books, and if you want you can call for books and they'll be delivered to it. Why they have 4 small chairs, I won't go into it, but there's quite a different sort of space. And then, of course, this looks more like our traditional library with fusty books, very, very exciting things for historians. But these different spaces could actually set a context for the work being done there. We might be able to think about how could we embed the digital things into these areas, rather than, as happened here, it's buried back in the corner, and it doesn't, you have to be specifically there to use their computer systems. I actually think that in my field, digital libraries, we've got digital. We don't like physical stuff, because that's old, dated. But actually, physical media has really great value. I've got a personal collection of early 19th century biographical books that are really useful for what I do as a historian. And yeah, I'm not going to be throwing them away anytime soon, because the original has a value. Some of these things, not even the British Library has a copy of.
You should, though. Send them our way.
Yeah, I actually rescued one of your books once. Never mind. And this detachment, I think, is actually not very useful, because what people do in physical spaces, as you'll see, is sometimes they use different things together at the same time. People use different books, they use different media, they use different types of books as well in the same place. And I don't think this is going to change whatever we do. There's going to be lots of overlap for a very long time. And I actually think one of the things is physical space has itself value, which sort of picks up on the topic we had at the last workshop. The spaces create feelings and ideas and inspiration. So I'm going to very quickly gloss over these first 2 bits, because that's the more technical parts of the stuff. And then I'll do something about actually what I did with user studies, because that's where some more interesting things have come out of this. But it won't make sense unless I tell you what I did. So I developed a system called EMLI. I couldn't come up with a better acronym. We've only got 6 weeks. The acronym's going to be BAD, which is Embedded Library, which is just a proof of concept that I implemented in Java using Greenstone, which is a large, well-developed digital library system, which I've been involved in writing over many years. I also used a thing called libNFC, which allows us to connect to RFID sensors in all sorts of different ways. And using these, because it's all cross-platform, I could run it on Windows, Mac, whatever, and it would all work. And what I was interested in doing specifically was using the physical space of a library, because in a lot of libraries, a certain space represents a certain topic, a certain material. For instance, you could have stacks of shelves nearby on a particular subject. There could be a whole room set aside, like the British Library saying that this is our old books, so this is the India Office Library. And also certain individual objects, like a book or a microfiche or whatever it might be, might itself infer a topic. But if we're going to do that, we need to do some sensor stuff for the computer to know what's happening in the real world. So I used a mixture of Bluetooth. If you ever want to do location sensing in a small space, Bluetooth is super cheap, and you can actually control it using chicken wire. I'll explain that another time. So we used Bluetooth to say which area that you were within the stacks, so there's sort of zonal positioning. And the RFID was really just picking up what is on the book table in front of me. There's a paper I can point you to that has more details on what they actually did. But technologists like myself usually go, hey, we can do great stuff, but it may actually not make any difference to the users. So for a change, I actually decided to be principled and do a user study, stuff like that. That's what people did. How do people actually use space in the library? Well, it turns out, and I know people are quite heavyweight people in library science, there's a surprising lack of research in that within library science. There is research, but it's not as extensive as you might expect. Do different locations produce different behaviours? Well, people have suggested that, yes, but I needed to look at it in a different way. So why not want to use a study? That could be quite exciting. So I'll now go through the user studies. I did 3 very quick and dirty user studies. I actually run a tutorial for how to do quick and dirty user studies, that I practice what I preached here. So I did in-situ observations at, actually in the end, I actually lied in the paper, said to the truth was 3 libraries. Actually I sat in Swansea and saw what people were doing at Swansea, because I was still there quite a bit. I sat in the library here, which was quite interesting, including Aldi, very different environment, and I hung out at UCL as well, because I'm there too. But at Swansea in the city, I did some interviews to actually try and get some background on what was going on. And I did a pilot project here with the support, which was much appreciated of my colleagues in the library. And just to have an idea of how different these spaces are, in London City here, we've got very interleaved desks and stacks. There's about 3 stacks in sequence, then a pair of desks. 3 stacks, a pair of desks. It's very regimented. Whereas Swansea's, it's much more separated, as Emma could tell you. And there's the Dextrian type shelving downstairs, and there's quite nice coffee areas upstairs. It's much more varied. And particularly at Swansea, with this variety of space, you might think we'll see a lot more variety than at City. It turned out to be not quite that simple, actually, but there we go. And with that, what I observed was that despite the differences in space, you can actually start to see some very common themes between the two. Obviously, the physical organisation did have an impact. I'm going to just shave that off for today. But there are interesting things like people working in groups. Some of these were more often students, actually. I've actually done this now at a reference library in Canada. And as I can tell you, there are actually people coming in groups to do research in research libraries, which was quite surprised by. But they'd often have many copies of the same physical text. And you could overhear discussions about how they were interacting with that.